Okay, so for the final touches in the image, I just like to add a little extra polish on top of everything. So sometimes I'll accentuate some flares. I might put a little extra shine in the eyes. I might contour the body a little bit with dodge and burn. So we'll do a little bit of everything. So I want to accentuate this flare coming through the window. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to select my pen tool. And you'll notice light moves in a bit of a cone shape. So starting small at the source, spreading out as it goes further. So go up here, bring it on back. There we go. And we got pretty much a cone shape there. So I'm going to make my selection. It's okay to leave the feather radius wherever it is because we're going to add an extra blur. So with that selection made, I'm going to create a curves adjustment layer. And I'm going to pull it up. All right. You'll notice that looks pretty terrible. But hang in there, because what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Filter. Go to Blur. We're going to go to Gaussian Blur. And I find that the highest amount possible works the best, just because if you have any hard lines over here on the edge, it looks super, super fake and cheesy. So 1,000 pixels for the radius. Going to select OK. Gonna wait for it to load. All right. So this looks a little bit intense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the opacity, bring that down a little bit. Like 75, nah, about 60%. And since this seems to be kind of flattening the image here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a little bit of an S-curve with the curve layer. So create a little bit of contrast in there just so it's not, doesn't have that cheesy biblical kind of glow to it. It looks pretty good. Maybe down a little bit more in the shadows. All right. That's pretty good. Maybe go down to 51%. And one thing I noticed is since we're on a normal blending mode, it was affecting color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a hue saturation layer. Going to right click. And I'm going to go down to create clipping mask. So what that is, it means that this is clipped to the layer beneath it, which means that any adjustment I make in this will only affect the layer it's clipped to. So I'm going to bring down the saturation just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit, just so it kind of matches the rest of the image. There you go. All right, we're going to name this flare. Okay. All right. Next up, I'm going to give the body of the model a little bit of contour. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before with my dodge and burn layer. I'm going to make it the same way. Just create an empty layer, soft light blending mode, shift delete, fill it with 50% gray. All right, select my dodge brush. And I'm just going to kind of go over the highlights, add a little extra highlight to it. You really don't want to overdo it here. It can look really whack. And you can make people look like dolls. So some people like that. It's not really my style. All right. Okay, go to his face now. Be really careful not to overdo it in the face too. This is where it's much easier to overdo it. Kind of follow the line, that ridge in his nose. Bring a little bit up under the eye here. We're just kind of accentuating highlights that are already there. A little bit in the lips here, give a little bit of shape to those. Very, very subtle. Okay. All right. And you can even go to the bike. Since this would be considered a commercial image, you'd generally go over the bike as well and kind of do the same thing. So you'd be dodging the highlights and burning the shadows just to make the bike look a little more contoured. I'll show you just for education's sake, but there we go. Kind of do the same thing. So run that highlight along this tube here. There we go. I'm not going to get too crazy with it. I've already finished this image. This is just kind of an educational video. So that's kind of how I do the dodge and burn to contour the body. We could do a before and after so you can see his face. Very, very subtle. You're just kind of adding a little bit of polish to it. So we'll call this DB2. The very last thing I like to do is I'll create a curves adjustment layer. Pull it up. And Command I to invert it so it hides it. Select my brush tool. Select white on the paint color. And then I'll zoom in and just paint that curve layer in on the little highlights in the eyes. Just really, really subtly. You have to be really careful here, especially since this image is so dark. It could look really cheesy if you overdo it. There we go, before and after. Super, super subtle. All right, and let's zoom out. All right, select everything to group up. Let's call it Final Touch. Okay, so there's that. Much cooler. So now we can go turn off all the layers and look at them one at a time. So this is our original image. We cleaned it up, took out the excess kind of junk in the image, flattened his stomach a little bit. Here's the color grade. Okay, made it look pretty cool, dramatic. Fix the colors, and then the final touches. All right. All in all, much better. Okay, and that's how I'd retouch this commercial image. Thanks for watching.